democracy is democracy if it's based on the will of the people. And the liberals must admit or must accept that it's not always them who would win the elections.
Mr. Péter Szijjarto, Foreign Minister of Hungary, thank you so much for taking the time to be here on the program and answer some of the questions that are most important to the viewers and to the people of Denmark. I appreciate that very, very much.
So much time was flying.
Sending weapon to Ukraine, and you have closed your country for weapon transport from Europe into Ukraine through Hungary. Why are you so opposed to weaponizing or help weaponize Ukrainians?
Because we do believe that the more weapons are being delivered to this war, the longer this war will take. So therefore, from the very beginning, we made it very clear that they respect the position of the others. We respect the decisions, the positions and the decisions of the others. But we will not take part in that. Because we do believe that sending weapons does not contribute to solving this issue. And I understand that your Prime Minister and many other Prime Ministers in the European Union say that this is their war, this is our war as Europe as well. But may I disagree with that? No, this is not our war. This is a war between Ukraine and Russia. Obvious who launched the war, obvious who is the victim. There's no question. It's obvious that we condemn the war, but it's not our war. We are not at war, and we hope that we will be not at war either. And from this perspective, the last meeting of the foreign ministers of NATO was very alarming and very concerning, because that was the first time in the last 2 years when I had the feeling, since the war has broken out, the first time I had the feeling that we are stepping beyond a red line which we have drawn together by making a unanimous decision 2 years ago that NATO is not party to the conflict, and we have to do everything in order to avoid the direct confrontation between NATO and the Russian Federation. And last 2 weeks ago, on the NATO Foreign Ministerial, I had the feeling for the first time that we are going beyond this red line.
What is that red line you're crossing, you think?
With the increased coordination of NATO when it comes to training and when it comes to weapon deliveries, NATO gets closer to the war than ever before. Because so far what has happened? European countries like you yourself, like Denmark, as a NATO and EU member state, yes, you have delivered weapons, you took part maybe in training as well, but I'm not
You think we shouldn't have delivered those weapons?
No, I never, I have a special position here.
Yes, I understand that.
But what I want to say is that I never interfere into domestic decision making of other countries, because it's up to the it's up to the Danish people to decide whether the Danish government has decided rightfully or not rightfully when you decided to start delivering weapons. And it is up to the Hungarians as well to judge whether the Hungarian government made the right decision or wrong decision when decided not to deliver weapons. But by the way, this question was decided on the last parliament elections in Hungary, because there were two very clear alternatives in this regard, and we have won big time.
And I fully understand that, but still, some would say that in a situation like this, let's just imagine that Hungary was somehow invaded by Russia or any other great power that was trying to take parts of your country. Now, if our reaction in Europe was as lukewarm towards you as yours is towards Ukraine, wouldn't you feel disappointed by the solidarity from Western Europe?
Well, we are a NATO member state. So if you're a NATO member state and if we are attacked, then it, according to the Chapter 5 of the NATO founding charter, all allies have to feel as being, or have to consider as if they had been attacked,
but maybe
and then they have to help. So we are, but they can't, because we are NATO, and in NATO we have common rules and regulations.
But so still, this is totally different. I understand that, but still, there is a room for interpretation, and I'm not disagreeing with you, obviously, because what you're saying is factually correct. I'm just saying that if you're Ukrainian and you look to Hungary and you see the way, for instance, your Prime Minister Orban visited last year President Putin. And
they just met
they met in Beijing. They met in Beijing in a way that I haven't seen, at least, your Prime Minister meet with President Zelensky in the same sort of manner. That somehow you send the signal that you are more on the side of Russia than on the side of Ukraine. Do you understand that?
No, I understand what you say, but I disagree, because we have made it very clear from the beginning that we do condemn this war. And it's very easy to say it here in your television studio, it's very easy to say in Washington, to say it in Brussels. But my question is, why those who are so loudly against the war and so loudly against Russia, why these politicians don't go to Russia and tell them there, I've done it. I've done it. I was a guest to the
Have
Russian...
you been to Russia saying to the Russian government, you should pull out of Ukraine?
Yeah, I was there participating at the Russian Energy Week meeting. There were thousands, there were around 1,000 spectators. I was sitting next to the leaders of the Russian energy companies and Deputy Prime Minister Novak, as far as I remember. I said it there very clearly that the war is bad for us. We do condemn the war. Please stop the war. I said it. I mean, it doesn't really need courage. Doesn't really need courage to say it here in this studio or in the Danish parliament or in the Swedish parliament or in the NATO headquarters. Go there and tell them. And once again, we are on the side of Ukraine. That's not a question. But we do not consider this as if it was our war. Because for us, the Hungarian government, the most important duty is to protect the Hungarian people, to preserve the safety and security of the Hungarian people. And sorry, the way to do that is to make sure that our country will never be dragged into this war.
And part of that, securing Hungary, is that also making sure that you remain friends with Russia?
But why you say that?
Because when we talk about, for instance, your Prime Minister meeting with President Putin,
but I mean,
when we talk about, on several occasions, for instance, when we talk about sanctions against Russia, now, Hungary opposes these sanctions. That's why I'm saying there seems to be at least some sort of alliance or friendship between Hungary and Russia.
So first, factually speaking, you do not only meet your friends, right? Diplomacy is not about meeting friends. It would be too easy. Diplomacy is about meeting everyone. And I do think that cutting the channels of communication would be absolutely against the European interest. I tell you why. Because this war will be completed by negotiations for sure. My question is, if all the channels of communication are being cut, then how gonna we talk to each other? Russia is going to remain a part of Europe. It is part of the regional rationality. You are far away, it might be different for you, but we are too close. So I mean, channels of communication cannot be cut. And once again, it's not a big thing as a diplomat, as a foreign minister, to talk only to those to whom you agree with. Let's talk to those as well whom you disagree. Try to explain why you disagree, and try to convince. And I tell you another thing: who is friend to whom? Okay, regarding sanctions, we have been under huge pressure to cut the nuclear cooperation with the Russians.
You have a strong nuclear cooperation.
Yeah, we do have a strong. But yeah, I'm personally responsible for the construction of our new nuclear power plant, which is in the making. The main contractor is Rosatom, which is the state nuclear energy company of Russia. Okay, but now if you go to the site of the construction, you know what companies you will see there? American and German subcontractors of Rosatom. And it's no wonder because
when you bring up energy, for instance.
Do you understand what
I understand what you mean? But still, when we talk about your relationship with Russia, for instance, what we would be concerned about from a European perspective would be the energy dependency that you have on Russia. Now, is that sort of part of the deal here, that you remain neutral? Something that most European leaders oppose vehemently. You remain neutral towards Russia in order to secure, and I think people would understand that, in order to secure your own energy.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, we are a sovereign country. So we always make sovereign decisions. We don't bargain on such kind of things, and we don't let ourselves be blackmailed. This is number one. Number two, when it comes to energy cooperation, it's such a hypocrisy, such a hypocrisy, because I tell you what, Russia was the #1 uranium supplier of the United States last year. No one raises this question. The United States have spent $1 billion last year in Russia buying Russian uranium. And tell you another thing, oil sanctions. Okay, Russia had 0.5% share when it comes to exporting oil to India. Now they have 35% of the shares.
Obviously, that market has shifted away from Europe.
Europe has never bought oil from India before. Now, Europe is the #1 customer of Indian oil.
Energy and hypocrisy, that goes hand in hand. But it also goes hand in hand in Hungary.
Why you don't ask the Americans? Why you don't ask
now you're the foreign minister of Hungary.
Ask the Americans about that? Because the journalists are not very brave when it comes to...
I promise you, if Joe Biden or his foreign minister was there, I would ask him these questions.
I'll definitely watch it.
And obviously the Nord Stream 2 project is an example of what you talk about. There has been an ambivalence towards energy dependency from Russia. But still, have you done anything in Hungary to get independent from Russian energy?
Sure.
Because this is whether you are friends with Russia or not. This must be a matter of national security, that you are not dependent on Russia for this.
Yeah, but you know that energy is a physical question and not an ideological question, right? So as long as you cannot deliver, for example, oil in a backpack or in a sports bag, you are determined by infrastructure, right? By pipelines. Now, there are two pipelines leading to Hungary when it comes to oil. Two. One pipeline from Russia through Ukraine. That supplies us, Slovakia, and partly the Czech Republic. If we cut this pipeline, there's one alternative route coming from Croatia. But the capacity of that is much less compared to what we need as our supply. It was like 1.5 years ago when we raised this issue in the European arena that please, let's build up a European project in order to increase the capacity of this pipeline through Croatia, so we would be able to supply us through that pipeline as well, not by Russian oil. You know what was the answer of the Croats? They have done nothing. They have increased the transit fee 5 times. That was the answer. I give you another example.
Just one brief example.
We could buy a lot of additional gas from Turkey, from Azerbaijan, and from Qatar because we have the contacts. We have asked the European. The problem is that the pipeline network in Southeast Europe is simply not able to carry more gas to deliver more gas than currently. We asked the European Union to help us financially to increase the capacity in that region so we can buy gas from alternative sources. You know what was the answer? Gas is not modern, so they will not invest in. So this is a matter of physics.
I understand that, but I also understand that your answer to my question is that yes, you are dependent on energy from Russia.
And Europe doesn't help us, and no one helps us. That's the most important issue. So we are under pressure to diversify. Then when you ask for help, you know, everybody listens and says, this is your issue.
Let me ask you, because I want to get back to that even more, but that is a concern in Europe, that somehow the war in Ukraine is a first step for Russia, Putin's Russia, President Putin's Russia, that another country, second country, third country would be next step for Russia. Are you at any point concerned about Russian imperialism?
We are absolutely not concerned about Russia attacking either an EU or a NATO member state. We don't think it will happen.
Are you afraid about this idea of Russian imperialism?
But I don't like ideology. Let's speak about physical things because ideology is
when we talk about.
But it doesn't make sense. But it doesn't make sense. What I do think is that Russia, President Putin, his ambitions will not attack any EU or NATO member state. That's my assessment of the situation. I understand that others would think differently.
The Polish would say differently.
Yeah, they would say that, but I respect it. I mean, come on, I respect it.
Do you understand them? Do you understand why they say that? Do you understand from history?
Since I'm not Polish, you know, I can't think with a Polish mindset. But
you're human. You have the same brain as the Polish.
No, but I respect it. I respect their position, and I never judge them for that position. The problem is that the mutual respect is now totally missing from European politics, because when I say that I don't think they would attack, they immediately stigmatize me. Friend of Putin, spy of the Russians, propagandist of the Kremlin. So this is the problem, that there's no mutual respect. If we have a differing opinion, let's take it as natural, and let's try to see where we can cooperate.
I fully understand that, but you must also recognize that the behavior of Hungary, for example, opposing the sanctions towards Russia, or your Prime Minister meeting with Putin, which is something that no Western leader has been doing.
Because they have not opposed. We have agreed. We have given our consent.
You were dragged to accepting that the EU had these sanctions. You were opposing them vehemently.
No, we have opposed sanctions which would have hurt our national interests badly. For example, nuclear cooperation, or gas cooperation, or oil cooperation. And why? I told you the reasons. These are physical questions, and not as long as you cannot heat the houses of your people with ideologies or statements of politics, you need gas, right? And the gas comes from where there's a pipeline. This is so easy. I mean, there's no ideology, it's physics, very easy.
Let me ask you that, because I've talked to family members about this, that when we talk about Hungary, they talk about 1956, the uprising against the Soviet Union. They talk about the late 1980s, where you were an avant-garde country opposing the Soviet Union. A lot of people have a different, it's different for people to understand how you came from that very a critical position towards Russia to now being seen, at least, as the country in Europe that is the most understanding towards Russia.
But, this is...
What is it that we don't understand, in other words?
This is not a fair perception. It would be fair if we had not condemned the war, for example. it would be fair if we had said the war is fine. But this is not the case. We have condemned the war, we say it's bad, and we want the war to be stopped. So it's so obvious. And so these perceptions are simply not fair. What would be the reason? I do believe that, since the government of Hungary is a very sovereignistic government, we have been in office for 14 years, very anti-mainstream government. Whatever we do, whatever we act, whatever decision we make, it's always opposed, it's always seen as,
But you are always opposing, or at least on key issues you are opposing.
But this is again not true, because there are some very spectacular issues where we differ on opinions. But I thought democracy would be about that, right? That you might differ on opinions. So what's wrong with that? We are usually challenged for rule of law and democracy. And then,
is that a misunderstanding?
Yeah, and then because when we have a differing opinion, we are immediately considered as non-European, as whatever. This is so unfair.
Perhaps it's not just because of the criticisms, it's also because some of the things that are said from your government. Let's switch then to the EU and the upcoming European elections. And just picking up on what you just said, I read your Prime Minister, obviously he's in charge of your government and in many ways of the country. Sure. He said in a speech in Budapest last year, if we want to preserve Hungary, we have to occupy Brussels. So, it's not just semantics that we find, it's actually what is said from the Hungarian Prime Minister. If we want to preserve Hungary, we have to occupy Brussels. What does that mean?
Yeah, I'm very happy to explain. So, currently the biggest debate in EU, I think, is between the sovereignists and the federalists. We, who do belong to the sovereignist camp, we do think that no more competences should be brought to Brussels from the member states, because that would come with giving up a big portion of our sovereignty. So therefore, we want to see a strong European integration based on strong member states. Meaning, no other competences should be brought to Brussels. Currently, Brussels wants to take away more competences from the member states. And we don't support that. That's why we do hope that on the next European Parliament elections to come soon, sovereignistic political forces, sovereignistic parties will win big time.
So, as the opinion polls suggest that they will.
Yeah, well, hopefully they will rule Brussels. So Brussels will not want to take away more competences from the member states.
So the occupation of Brussels is not about bringing in Hungarian military as you take over the presidency.
You can take this for granted.
Yes,
take this for granted. But for many reasons we would not do that. Okay?
Perhaps, yes. But let me just because what you say that Brussels shouldn't take more away from your sovereignty.
Yeah.
Now, what you could also say is that the agreement that you signed when you entered the Union, now you have to comply to the demands from that point. And when you speak about the criticism of rule of law or democracy or media independence, this is you, according to the EU, not delivering on what you promised as you gave your signature. Why is it that Hungary has such a difficult time complying to the rules of the European Union?
It's a big debate whether we do comply or not, because
at least EU say you don't, and they withhold the funds.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. So now we are not payers like you. So which is crazy, because these funds are ours. This fund is not a fund of the European bureaucrats. This fund is not a humanitarian donation.
It's from taxpayers from all over Europe.
Including Hungarians.
Yes,
and
still.
And these European funds are not falling down from the skies. They are created by the work of the European people, including the Hungarians.
For instance.
Of course. And then we have signed contracts, and these contracts have two sides: supply and demand, right? Obligations and benefits. And
your obligations, you're not living up to your obligations.
Yes, but that's a debate, because we do think we do. We are certain that we do.
But
the problem...
Everyone would say that. Well, if there's an agreement... No. Everyone would say that if they are criticized for not applying to the contract, they say, well, we do in our own understanding. But when the rest of the community say, well, you might think you are, now let me tell you, now we tell you, you are not complying.
Okay, my problem here is the following. Today, on the press conference after meeting Lars, your foreign minister, who is... I respect him a lot, and my prime minister respects him a lot. They serve together with
as prime minister.
And he really speaks highly about Lars when we talk to each other. So I was confronted with a question about the child protection law in Hungary, for example. And if I had run a survey there, who has read that law before making statement about that law. I think I wouldn't have found anybody in the room who would have read the law. So my problem is that these statements, which you refer to, are usually made by people who do not have a clue about the content of these laws, never read these laws. So my thumb rule would be the following. First, read, and second, speak about it. That's the biggest problem.
But then you do comply in the end, and as you did, the funds that were withheld from you, you eventually reformed some of the judiciary that we talk about, academic freedoms, judiciary independence, rights of sexual minorities, and so on. You reformed your laws on that point, and you received the money.
But we didn't receive the money. That's the problem. Yeah, we wish we would.
You got at least 1 billion euros.
Okay, out of 30.
Last year. Yeah, you want more. Let me know.
We don't want more. We want more what is due to us. I mean, according to the rules and regulations, we should have received 30 billion.
But Sam, let's say just one of the viewers watching this show say, well, I'm a Danish taxpayer. Why should I pay taxes to a country that shows so little solidarity with the rest of us?
I tell you why.
Because you understand that question?
Yeah, I understand, yeah. Because when we entered the European Union, we have made a compromise. This compromise was that we have opened our market for investors from the EU member states. We, as a country, which was occupied by the communists for 40 years, with no accumulated capital, totally or mostly defenseless to economies and investors of those countries who have had freedom as natural after the Second World War, so we're economically much stronger. So we allowed the foreign investors to come to Hungary, make enormous profits, bring them back home. So if you compare the sum of money which have been brought back in the last, I don't know how many decades, by the since we have joined the European Union.
This is business.
I mean, come on. We have opened our market. They have brought a lot of profit back to the Danish economy. And it's very competitive to the money we would get from the European Union. I mean, this is a win-win situation. European Union has won a lot with the Central Europeans joining. And the Central Europeans have won a lot by joining the European Union.
If it's the same, I understand. But if it's the same, the money is almost the same. And furthermore, in the EU, you have to comply to rules that you, on various occasions, things are wrong. What is stopping you from leaving the EU?
But why would we?
Because you criticize it all the time.
We are a committed EU member state, but we do not give up our right. We do not give up our right to go into a discussion, go into a debate how to improve the European Union, because we do believe that European Union could be much stronger than currently. European Union should not have lost its second place when it comes to share of global GDP. European Union could be a peaceful place. European Union could be much safer if, according to the Danish and the Hungarian position, which are eye to eye in this regard, we would not have allowed illegal migration, to go overwhelming in the European Union. So we are in the European Union for our dreams, because we do believe that European Union can be a much better place, much more competitive and much safer. And we do see ourselves inside the European Union, and we try to improve it.
Although we have 30 minutes, I don't have time to bring up the immigration issue. I just want to touch upon one last issue that concerns a lot of people. No, because that is obviously also a very profiled issue in the upcoming elections.
For sure.
I want to ask you about the situation in the United States, actually. Do you think, as Foreign Minister of Hungary, that Europe would be better off if Donald Trump were given 4 more years?
Yes, I do think so. Simply because of his track record. I mean, if President Trump is being elected, I'm pretty sure that we will come back to a more peaceful situation in Europe than before. So I think the peace has a name, and the name of peace is Donald Trump. I am pretty sure that he will be able to make peace in our neighborhood. Yeah.
Why would he be better than if Joe Biden were to be given 4 more years?
Simply because of track records. I mean, under the presidency of President Biden, the war has broken out in Europe. The war is going on. It's worse and worse. When President Trump was in office, there was no war in Europe, and
there was war in Afghanistan.
But the whole situation globally was much more peaceful for the Europeans than the current one. But we leave it to the Americans.
I understand that. What does your colleague in Europe say when you talk about this and you have dinner in the evening after the meeting, and then you say to them, I hope that Trump will win? How many raise their hand and say I disagree?
No. Most of them disagree. You can be sure about that. Or at least they're not brave enough to say they would agree.
Also because they see what happening in the United States around Trump is somehow illiberalizing democracy.
Yeah. Look, we do believe that democracy is a democracy. It does not need any proverb. So saying that democracy is only democracy if liberals are governing, it's simply unfair. It's simply unfair. Democracy is democracy if it's based on the will of the people. And the liberals must admit or must accept that it's not always them who would win the elections.
Mr. Peter Szijjarto, Foreign Minister of Hungary, thank you so much for taking the time to be here on the program and answer some of the questions that are most important to the viewers and to the people of Denmark. I appreciate that very, very much.
So much time was flying.
Sending weapon to Ukraine, and you have closed your country for weapon transport from Europe into Ukraine through Hungary. Why are you so opposed to weaponizing or help weaponize Ukrainians?
Because we do.